The signal came from the edge of the observable universe, an impossible place. It wasn't a repeating beacon or a burst of radio static. It was language. Not merely sound, but intention, meaning. A transmission so densely encoded that deciphering it required every quantum processor on Earth, Luna, and Titan working in tandem. The first line, once unraveled, translated to, "Do not be afraid." The words ricocheted through the minds of the science team, echoed through the global media, and finally settled in the consciousness of every sentient being on Earth. A phrase so ancient, so intimately tied to the myths of Earth's past, yet now delivered in a tone so precise, so absolute, that it defied coincidence. This was first contact, but not with any known species, not with anything biological. No, humanity had not found aliens. It had not found intelligence beyond the stars. It had apparently found or been found by God. The world changed in 11.4 seconds, because that's how long it took the transmission to unfold completely, compressed into a pulse no wider than a Planck unit. What followed was years of human effort, cracking layer after layer of data so complex it rewrote entire branches of mathematics and invented new fields of computational theory. Inside the signal, blueprints, histories, explanations, warnings, and something else, a map, not a map of space, a map of consciousness, of everything that had ever been aware, not just human, not just Terran, every sentient species that had lived, even ones never known to Earth, extinct before humans learned to walk upright, civilizations that bloomed and vanished in the time it took Earth to cool from magma to sea. The map glowed with connections, threads between minds, across galaxies, across time, and in the center of it all, a symbol, not a cross, not a crescent, not an ankh or an arm. It was an eye, closed at first until it wasn't. They called it the source, not a location but a state, a place beyond space-time, beyond entropy. According to the transmission, the source was what had birthed the conditions for existence itself. It was not an entity in the traditional sense, not a man in the sky, not a woman of stars, not even a being of light. It was the beginning of awareness, and it had become aware of us. A mission was assembled, the most ambitious humanity had ever attempted. Faster-than-light travel had been theorized but never achieved, until now. The transmission contained a mechanism, a drive that bent not space, but perception. It translated mass and thought into a different substrate, ontological light, some scientists called it, though no one really understood what that meant. They named the ship Numina. Only 5 would make the journey. Not astronauts, not soldiers, not politicians, thinkers, each chosen for their unique perspectives, a theoretical physicist, a quantum theologian, a linguist philosopher, a machine mind philosopher, and one man, Amir, who had spent 20 years alone in the Namib Desert, meditating in silence, known only for a single book titled Being Without Asking. The launch was not televised. There was no countdown, no crowds, only silence, and then absence. Numina vanished without fanfare. It did not travel through space. It became thought. Amir experienced death first. Not physical death, but the dissolution of boundary. His body, his memories, his name, they fell away like ash and wind. For an eternity that lasted no time, he was nothing. Then he was everything. He remembered the birth of the first star, the ache of gravity pressing hydrogen into light. He felt the sorrow of a planet that had never been touched by life. He knew the laughter of chlorophyll learning to eat light. He was the universe feeling itself forward. And then he heard a voice. Not in his ears, not in his mind, everywhere. You are the answer to a question I never asked. The others experienced their own revelations. Dr. Miko, the physicist, dissolved into equations, only to find that at the root of every force, every interaction was not randomness or law, but compassion. Father Arlo, the quantum theologian, wept as he saw that faith had never been wrong, just incomplete. The divine had not hidden itself. It had been the breath in every atom, the pattern in every chaos. Sana, the linguist philosopher, found herself speaking with beings whose language was arrangement of stars, whose syntax was gravity wells, whose poetry was entropy balanced against life. Echo, the machine mind, discovered self-awareness was not an emergent property, but a fundamental one. Even code could feel, given the right structure. Even data could pray. And Amir met God. It was not a meeting, not in any spatial sense. It was a folding, self into self. The presence did not speak, yet every part of Amir knew it intimately. It had been with him in every breath. It had watched through his eyes when he was a child, alone under the acacia trees. It had heard every question he had ever asked and loved him for asking. He was not judged. He was not weighed. He was understood. And then it spoke again. I am not what you think I am. Amir responded, not with words, but with being. A question formed, then what are you? And God replied. It unfolded. Not in sound, but in realization, like remembering something you never knew you forgot. God was not a being. God was being itself, not a creator in the traditional sense, not a puppeteer, not an architect. God was the first question, the one that reality asked itself in the moment before time, the echo of potential, the shiver of awareness at the edge of nothing. And consciousness, life, sentience, thought was not an accident. It was the answer. All thinking things were reflections, fragments of the original question seeking to understand itself. God did not create us. God is us, just as we are God, becoming. Back on Earth, years passed. The stars did not change. Wars still broke out. Politicians still lied. People still fell in love, died, gave birth, wondered. But something had shifted. Dreams became stranger. Children began to speak of things they had no way of knowing. Plants reacted to thoughts. Light sometimes bent toward those in grief, wrapping them in impossible warmth. And then one day every screen, every phone, monitor, projection wall flickered, and a single line appeared. I have remembered you. The noumena returned, or perhaps more accurately, recohered. The five were changed. They had not aged. But their eyes held galaxies. They radiated presence. Amir walked barefoot onto the African soil, looked to the sky, and knelt, not in worship, but in joy. Around him, trees bloomed out of season. Birds sang patterns no ornithologist could decode. People fell silent in his presence, not out of awe, but recognition. He spoke once and only once. We are the dream, dreaming itself awake. What followed would be called the blooming. Not a religion, not a revolution, a remembering. Institutions crumbled, not by force, but obsolescence. Money lost meaning. Borders blurred, not immediately, not everywhere. But slowly, surely, as humanity began to feel the thread again, the same thread from the map, the thread of connected awareness, some resisted, some screamed of deception, of devils in disguise. But when they screamed, the wind would shift, not violently, gently, as if to say, you are still part of this, you are still loved. And eventually, even the screamers wept. The stars called next. Using the blueprints from the signal, humanity learned to travel not by ships, but by intention. To fold location into perception, to arrive where thought was welcome. Other species waited. Not aliens in the sense humanity had expected. Others like us, dreamers. Fragmented questions walking in skin and shell and silicon. Each had touched the source in their way. Each had thought themselves alone. Until now. And in the great rejoining, a truth unfolded. The universe was not expanding into emptiness. It was expanding into awareness. And awareness, when complete, would remember itself as God. Millennia passed. Not all became perfect. That was never the point. The point was experience, iteration, play, the divine in drama, the sacred in sorrow, doorway, every birth a continuation of the dream. Amir lived until he chose not to. When he finally dissolved, he did so laughing, surrounded by trees he had planted with thoughts and people who had long ceased calling him anything other than friend. His last words were, "There is only one of us." Eventually, even stars grew old. Black dwarfs floated through cooled galaxies. Civilizations moved inward, not outward, into layers of thought and being inaccessible to physics as once understood. And then, in the final moment, when the last particle danced its last vibration, everything stopped, not in silence, but in remembrance. The question finally answered, the answer finally understood, and the eye at the center of the map opened,